Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Moises Esparza. I'm the exhibitions manager for the 27th edition of the San Diego Latino Film Festival. Thank you so much for joining us today and supporting us during our virtual relaunch of our festival. We intended on, having our festival back in March. It was postponed due to the coronavirus, but we figured things out, and now we're here bringing you a programming virtually. I hope that you're enjoying it from the safety of your own home. The wonderful part about being in a virtual space or in a virtual realm is that I get to engage with filmmakers from all over. And I rarely have the opportunity to speak with filmmakers for almost every film, which is just thrilling for me. And for tonight's post-screening discussion of Once Upon a Time in Venezuela, I have the director, Anabel Rodriguez Rios, who it's very late where she is, but she woke up just in time to have this conversation with us. Let's welcome Anabel. Hi,
Hi,
Anabel.
hello. Hi, hello, Moises. Thanks
So
very much for the San Diego Latino Film Festival for having our film here.
tell everyone what time it is, where you are, and where you are, of course. Where are you and what time is it?
Okay, people, I'm in front of the Danube River in Vienna city, that's in Austria, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God, you are so amazing and such a trooper for being here with us at 3 a.m. your time. Thank you, Anabel. Um, this virtual platform lets listeners and viewers engage via the written word. So if you have a question for Anabel or a comment about the documentary, feel free to type it out. I'll bring it on screen. Here's an example of what that will look like. This is from Ethan. It says, "Thank you, Anabel, for allowing San Diegans to see your movie." And then if you're also watching from the Eventive platform, you're also able to chat us messages. So feel free to do so, and I'll integrate those into this virtual conversation. Um, well, let's get started talking about Once Upon a Time in Venezuela. Anabel, there's a lot. There's different entry points into your documentary. I think,
Mm.
from your perspective, what sort of knowledge about the state of Venezuela now do you hope people enter with before watching the documentary? Like, what sort of knowledge do you think people should have before engaging with your documentary?
Well, Venezuela, I think that most of the people in the world know that Venezuela is a rich country that in a very short time came into a collapse stage. And people ask themselves, why? How
Mm-hmm.
is this possible? And I still ask this to myself. So I guess this is the ground question I think everyone has. And it's partly of the question I did have when I came into this village called Congo Mirador. What happened to us is my question that I came with into this village. So yeah, that would be.
Well, we start the documentary by seeing thunder against a black backdrop. And we end the documentary with one of the most, it almost felt surreal watching it out of the realm of reality. We see homes floating away on small rafts or boats. Powerful images that are unforgettable to start and begin your documentary. Tell me a little bit about the creative process behind deciding where to begin or when to begin or with what to begin and with what to end, because I think those parting shots will stay with me forever. It, it was a little bit heartbreaking, to be honest. So maybe talk a little bit about the composition between the beginning and the end.
Well, I got to say that it was a pure craft of observation.
Mm.
Uh, and the Catatumbo lightning, el relámpago del Catatumbo, is actually the first thing that brought me there, just as is narrated in the film. And yeah, because of it's the same reason why thousands and thousands and thousands of people over the years came to portray it because of being this natural phenomenon that was is as well this kind of things that connects you with the unknown, no? And it's this wonder that you have there, and the houses living, and many other details that seem to be um, uh, surreal, or as they call it in Spanish, mágicos. No, it's magic.
Mhm.
Um, and I tell you what, by being there, I we thought so many times for instance, the literature of Garcia Marquez.
No.
And I thought in those moments, I came to the conclusion that Garcia Marquez did more of a documentary work, and of an observation work than of imagination, because um, I think Latin America culture is full of these impressions, and this is a way of looking at things, but as well is a way of things on how they happen that they seem just not real, or they are so incredible, unbelievable. It would be the word that is as if they could not happen, and actually, for instance, this the trovador that is there, Camarillo, the man with the guitar, the old man. Tell me if he is not like one of these Garcia Marquez characters, this man that is the oldest man in town that has wings and that is like a bird. And um so then in many moments I was struck by this, and I think it has as well to do with certain way in which these forgotten villages that are so common in Latin America are, and how they exist. So then the creative process was very inspired in a way on how these classic storytellers have narrated us. Garcia Marquez, or for instance, uh, this Comala of Pedro Páramo. I don't know if you have read it. It's this village that is populated by ghosts, and then
Wow.
this person is like among ghosts. I recommend it highly, highly. Um, uh, so then this is in the background, I would say, this tradition on how to look at things as if they are to look at things on how unbelievable they are, and as well the choose of characters, so why to go with this man instead and with other, uh, or or as you well pointed, and this is interesting because this is more spontaneous than so elaborated intellectually. Why to begin with this, with the lightning? I don't know. It's just like one way of looking at things that come very much influenced by this narrative tradition.
Right. And you're talking about maybe a natural wonder of the world, like you mentioned, that maybe has explanation exists or no explanation exists on this almost surrealist plane. And you almost ground it among the water of Congo Mirador, this village that at some point was very, very populated, and also a very almost like a destination point, correct? If I'm understanding correctly, it used to be a very
Mhm.
thriving village. Am I mistaken in saying that?
Yeah, this place, look, the Maracaibo Lake is where the main oil industry of Venezuela is. And it attracted many people in an enormous, the lake is an enormous place. There are many villages and cities and so on. And it is a center that attracts not only in the case of Congo Mirador, it's a fisherman's village, but it attracted tourism and, for instance, sports, fishing, rich guys making these marathon circuits, races circuits, and
Wow.
um, there were circuits of navigation as well, of all kind of ships. Like for instance, that ship that you saw there in the in the in the forest, swollen by the forest, that got stuck 60 years ago.
Wow.
This was a ship that more than 60 years ago would transport goods from the river that came from the Andes, like cafe, cocoa, and so on, and would bring it even to New York. Yeah, it
Wow.
had so then it had a whole uh, life mainly trading life, and yeah. So in the village, there were never like thousands of people, but was a place that was full of life. Yeah. And with the decay of with the climate change, is that this place is becoming a swamp, but as well with the decay of the company, there is this decay as well of the village, and this neglectancy from the country. However, eh, it is nothing but the reflection. It's not nothing but an image of the whole country. Congo Mirador is like the whole Venezuela. It's a mirror for me. That's why I stay there, um, shooting for 5 years. I was shooting there
Wow.
and following these stories. And I did stay because it reflected in the sense, in the essence, what was happening to me, to my family, and to the country.
The documentary is clearly a reflection of Venezuela, though not told in overt over that, like it doesn't hit you over the head with any maybe potentially inflammatory images. You get a sense that the rot, the decay is coming from beneath, from inside. And if the rot, and maybe in this case the rot is coming from negligence on behalf of the government. And you start learning more about this through perhaps the conflict between, I guess I would say, I would call them your documentary's protagonists. You have Tamara, and then you
Yeah.
have Natalia, or Natalia,
Natalie.
um, from opposing political parties, correct? And
Yeah.
they are in a way pillars in a decaying city. One is a teacher, one is pro Maduro. Yes, pro Maduro, pro Chavez.
Yes.
So you have maybe these opposing forces that maybe push this documentary further into being this microcosm of what Venezuela is like. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you formed the story between these two women.
Yeah, it was a whole process, of course. And first, I did work with Natalie, the teacher, the only teacher of Congo Mirador, and oppositionist in the closet because of the conditions. So they are in,
Yeah.
yeah, because they are in a one. One has to understand that it is an environment that is under a totalitarian system, and this means that the party is more or less the same as the government, and the resources are centralized in the government, the jobs, the all that has to do with the reaching of first necessity things like food. The food is imported by the government, or there are business in other places of Venezuela. There are businesses of food import. The whole look at this. The situation is so tragic that over 20 something years, because of how it evolved, the mentality of the on how to was govern Venezuela. The private, all the private production was expropriated and taken over by the government, and was not. It was destroyed practically. It was not risen back again. So then that happened with the food. And then nowadays the country is dependent on food import. Yeah. And most of it is controlled by the government. And this happens with most of the resources. So this teacher, is in that environment. And I was shooting with her 2 3 years, and at the beginning I was really not allowed into Tamara's house, because I was as well I was identified with being oppositionist and friend of this teacher. And they call us in the division is so terrible in the country that the oppositionists, they have a name. They are called escuálidos, and in Venezuela escuálidos means like the ones without flavor. And I was escuálida in the eyes of Tamara. So, and I was not allowed there for 2 3 years, and at some point I could come in. Basically, the house that in which we were living, it was moved to the other village, like the way in which you see in the film. It was moved, and we were left without a place where to stay. So we offered Tamara a business of staying in her house, the whole crew. We were 5 people coming, I don't know for how long, because we already were shooting there for 2 or 3 years, and this could be 1 year, 2 years, we didn't know. And she did like that, because before being a party because before being a party leader, a party representative in the village, she is a businesswoman. So
Businesswoman. Wow.
yeah, yeah. So then that's how we came in and began to shoot. We had the fortune of shooting with her, and I say the fortune because me, of course, part of this polarization that in Venezuela got really radical. And when we are in such a state, it's very difficult to see the other side of things, or to see the situation as a whole, with sense of compassion. Yeah. And to live in Tamara's house allowed me to get to know her, and with the time to get to understand that it was really not about you and them, that the problem was not there. The problem is in the leadership, in very few people that are really like have been manipulating a whole society. And this is interesting because when we did present the film in Sundance, this was really the first thing that I would talk about with the people, that people were interested in the you know the polarization. And
Right.
it was striking for me to realize within the course of this year that this is really all over the world, even here in Austria, in different intensities. But to realize how in the States as well there is this tendency, um, and the problem in itself, besides the fighting in itself, turns to be a problem in cases like in Venezuela. I mean, this possibility is there, that the society really breaks in a way that all the populism uh, breaks the democracy, really. So it breaks the possibility of having spaces in which you can exist within different opinions and still work for the common good. And this, I think, is what I, in my heart, I bring as the as my personal realization on in which times I'm sitting in the world, times of polarization, unfortunately.
And Tamara is really humanized in the documentary, I think, via
Mm,
her visit to, I think it might have been a governor that she meets with at some point.
yeah.
She goes to have this power lunch or this breakfast with him that she thinks is going to, the state is finally going to listen to her, and the state that she believes in is finally going to give her a moment. But he takes a phone call during their meeting, and it was, I don't know. It seems like Tamara is so indoctrinated within the government, within the state. She believes in it so ardently that she doesn't see how it's also failing her in a way. That's just what I took away from that scene. Really, I was heartbroken for her. I was heartbroken for her in that way, in that what she believes in or the system she believes in, it's letting her down too.
Yes, it is like that. Whether she realizes or not, I think she
I
does.
realize that. Yeah.
I think she does. I mean, it's not so obvious. And actually, nowadays, it's not that she's out of the party. She continues because they continue being the source of the power, and the source. If you want to have something, they are the this system is the source. um but yeah, that moment was as well. I got to say, Moises, that this, in terms of narration,
Mm.
this was, for us, a big discussion on how to model it, because of course, as filmmaker, you can, like, can accentuate one thing or not. And the essence of that moment is in that shot, in that moment, that you realize. But this was not so obvious. It was made really with a lens, with a tele, and was captured exactly this moment. uh, and it was essential for us because a whole country is pretty much in her position. So the whole country lots of gave the power to these leaders, and it was a big betrayal. And I guess most of the people feel like this. I don't know about the people that are Chavez, that are pro Chavez. I don't know if this is the common case. I think that the reality is punching everybody in the worst way we could imagine, and this in itself is a betrayal. But I don't know if everybody is so aware that this was a big betrayal.
I see. I see. You know, it's in the news that people are moving out of Venezuela and migrating in huge numbers. And the film ends in a way, in a place of migration, with the homes drifting away.
Mm.
Um, and I think your documentary is such a powerful tool to maybe gain access to the real people who are going through this, and what it is for these people to leave, to feel like they have nowhere to go. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
um, it's
Yeah.
it was really. I mean, that was at the back of my mind when I was watching the film. I was trying to see. I was trying to conflate it or mix it up with like the news coverage that I've seen, the footage, and it's like this is such another. It added such a deep layer to it, and or to my understanding of the situation. And I'm really curious about what people, if many people in Venezuela have seen this movie, and what their reaction has been. That's something I
Oh,
really want to hear back. Want to hear
yeah.
about.
Well, yeah, we have it now on pre-premiere online in the Venezuelan Film Festival that exists because of the stubbornness of its creators, because the conditions are really like tough, yeah, financially mainly. And the team that is there running it are going into conditions of, well, shortages of all kinds of petrol and electricity and so on, and the internet it is random in the country right now.
Oh, okay.
It is running, and it's being focused in focus groups practically, and people are really excited about this. So then, and some people have seen it before, like journalists and so on, and there's been lots of course, with the premiere in Sundance. This was big news in Venezuela, because it's the first long documentary in Sundance. So, and in the let's say in a certain layer of the society, this is been people acknowledge that. So then it was already in the consciousness, and now there is this online festival. But the plan is to show it everywhere we can, and for that we have created an impact campaign for within Venezuela and for abroad on the theme of refugees, by the way. And
Mm.
our idea is that uh, in the country we can that we show it in public spaces, in both in theaters. There is a possibility of censorship. Let's see what happens.
Oh, wow. Okay.
If this censorship happens, uh, we are going to the streets within paid. This is the thing, that we are raising the funds to do the projections in the squares, and a little bit like guerrilla style as well, together with human rights organizations. And the idea is to put the film available so then it can go into the activities that they do really in a grassroots work that would take a couple of years. And funnily enough, there are these parliament elections that Maduro is calling to. And he traditionally, these elections are the day of San Nicolas. This is the 6th of December. And they are doing everything, so then they happen in on this 6th of December. So then few days before that, the idea is to do this that I'm narrating in the squares, and to have discussions about the role that people can have in such a situation, so to be a citizen in a totalitarian system, and to go into these elections that are fraud or not, which legitimacy is into question, of course. Um, to at least to talk about it, yeah? And to have a bit of a group therapy. And so then these scenes that you see of buying the votes and to give food for votes, this is happening right now in these days
Wow.
in Venezuela. They are giving. It's even worse because of the corona. The lockdown there is crazy, and of course a whole society, like the whole Latin America, depend on the day-to-day work. So to be in lockdown is really bad news for many people. Anyways, uh, that's the idea. So then wish us luck
I
to
do.
that's first, that is not censored. This would be a bit, but well, if it's censored, we have already a plan, but it still is, of course, a bit of a commando situation. But that's the plan.
And you lived in, did you live in Congo Mirador throughout the entire, was it 7 years that you said?
Yeah, it's 5 years we were
5
shooting.
years,
No,
5 years.
no. I mean, I would go there for a month, roughly every 3 4 months, and I would travel from here,
From Vienna?
from Vienna. Yeah.
Oh my
And I would
goodness.
arrive there, and to arrive there is a 2 days from Caracas. From here to Caracas is 14 hours, yeah? And then from Caracas to Congo Mirador is a 2 days trip.
Oh my goodness. Was, after you were done shooting, what was that, I guess, response as a filmmaker when you leave a place that you visited many, many times and spent
Mm.
significant amounts of time there? What is that function as a documentarian that lets you remove yourself from that experience? Or do you not want to remove yourself because it'll help with the editing or the final cut. But tell me a little bit about that emotional connection that you might develop for a place as a documentarian.
Well, it is with the place and as well with this idea and this feeling that it actually reflected us. I saw the opportunity of telling a story of Venezuela with all the, as a Venezuelan in the diaspora, I've gone through as as well as the 5 million people that are abroad. This is roughly the number right now. We have well a wound, no, and a pain because of that. And I guess that from that pain comes the necessity of telling this story and many stories that respond to this basic question of well, what happened and how it happened. So I saw in Congo Mirador the the possibility of telling a story that was uh, that symbolized very clearly the bigger picture. So then uh, that image and that commitment with that pain was what kept me going, and as well an amount of I would say at the beginning it was pretty much like anger, you know what I mean? Indignation, and what was like what was this fuel that would uh, bring me to and keep me doing this. This changed afterwards, but still, yeah, I think it became a bit of a mission. And this sounds pathetic, but as pathetic as it sounds, uh, it is a bit of a mission to keep more or less okay to be able to tell these stories.
Absolutely. And well, the post-production aspect of a documentary, I think, is always challenging because I'm sure you had footage upon footage that was not usable, not unusable. You just did not use it. How did you go about trimming and condensing and crafting? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, it took 2 years, like netto, they were 11 months, and over the course of 2 years, and there was a bit of an overlapping between the very last shootings
Mm.
and the editing. But the way it would be is that I would uh, put together, for instance, I would shoot a whole day, only one situation or two situations, and they would be sequences. And I would put together all of them and made them into half hours clips. And then these half hour clips, I would put them into 5 minutes clips.
Wow.
And through selection, we ended up with more or less 70 of these clips. And then the editor, Seb Bruderman here, would put the whole thing together, and we had a first uh, assemble of 4 hours or more. I think it was more, but
Oh
something
wow.
really was something, and and it was like, okay, this cannot be a series. This is gonna be you know, and 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 then. There is this first process of putting this into 2 hours, and then these 2 hours they did not work. Then we met a senior editor, Ricardo Acosta, who is a top editor whose work is in PBS, HBO, etc. And he is from the Cuban diaspora. So then he
Oh,
understands. So it's like we slowly create, like, between Cubans and Venezuelan diaspora, there is this complicity that one almost doesn't even have to talk about the main things because we know what we've gone through. And this was really interesting, his input. He helped us to refocus, to, so then we came into a process of destroying what we had and then to put it back together. And then we did something that is really interesting for filmmakers. We did a workshop in an institution that is called a Doc Incubator. They are here in Europe and they are excellent. Once you have gone through a process of really having a rough cut that has the story that you think, okay, this is the film. When you think this is the film, it is really not the film. and you go with them. We went through a process of re-editing. There were things like, for instance, that moment of Tamara with the government, it became really like a pillar of the whole narrative, So
Mm.
we knew that we were going to go to that. And within that idea, we rearranged the whole thing. So, and it was really a painful process of change from which we learn tones. Still, I had an ambition of making in Spanish it's called a narración coral, like several multi-character, really a multi-character narrative. And we did try that, and it was not really clear enough, and it's still my ambition to achieve something like that. It requires, I guess, more experience in the follow-up. Well, anyways, uh, so then we began with this multi-character thing, and at the end, it became what it is, which is like this clear antagonism between these two, uh, Tamara and Natalie's, as the knot of the whole narrative.
Yeah, and they really do bring such authentic and, I guess, delicate focus to your documentary. They're wonderful, wonderful anchors. But there are other things we see in your documentary. It's not just these two. There's footage, and this footage to me read as more hopeful. We see the young inhabitants of Congo Mirador, young children, that
Mhm.
perhaps represents. And I mean, it's a poster campaign. I think it's a young woman in a canoe. It's a child in a canoe, and she's rowing, which is such a beautiful image. And when you see that juxtaposed upon Once Upon a Time in Venezuela, you think it could be a fairy tale. It could be I don't know, like what one of these fantasy stories we know. So tell me maybe a little bit about their role in the documentary when you see the children. What are they supposed to represent in this context?
Well, they are the ones that don't have the responsibility and that are receiving this mad world, isn't it? And the
Yeah.
consequences of it. And this is what Joain is the name of this girl, and this is what happens to these kids, and this is the kind of world that we did legate to, and it's not their fault. Totally that the ones that don't have the responsibility. And the whole process of the film began with the kids, because I first did a short film there called The Barrel. You can see it in our webpage, which is once upon a time in Venezuela.com. There we put it for free after it went well. It had a whole life within year 2014 and 15, and it was around the kids. Um, and I continued that thread, but it happened to me that the first people that moved from the ones I knew were exactly the family that had this bunch of kids who I was working with, and then I was left without like the main characters, yeah. And the ones that stayed, eh, they didn't have like this conflict that I was looking for, and that's how I began. So, and I was changing according according to, on how things were changing in the country, in the village. And Joaini and her brother, they are these fishing kids. They were like the enemies of this bunch of kids that left the village that they moved. They were their enemies, and I stayed with them. And their stories are, well, stories of common stories there and in Venezuela, and in rural places in Latin America, I think, which is that there is their mother, for instance, is a prostitute, eventually works as a prostitute, and there is alcoholism, and she was abusing them as being little kids, and the grandmother took over. And this lady that is shouting at them and so on is their grandmother. They call her mommy, but it's their grandmother. And this is so common, isn't it? And well, nowadays, for instance, Joaini, and this is the biggest theme there in this village, is that the girls are taken for being women and sexually active very early. As soon as they get their period, they are considered uh, not any more kids. And nowadays, Joaini, for instance, she's 16 years old, and she's already living with a guy, yeah, and with a much older guy. And well, hope very soon, it's it's not a surprise if very soon she gets a kid, and this is even late. So I saw there girls of 12 years old being pregnant already, yeah. And there are cases of younger girls. So, and this is a big problem in the whole country because of the whole situation. There is no possibilities of for instance, contraceptive pills are expensive and rare. So the early pregnancy, it is the highest, it has the highest rate in Latin America, in Venezuela nowadays. So this is a theme that it is not fully developed there, but we see in the film. I mean, but is there? No, is this situation in which this girl is, she goes to this beauty contest that, if you see it from a perspective that is not so like in the a little bit with a bit of distance, is like a way of presenting the girls into their community as women, uh, in a sexualized way, isn't it? That they go there with their Miss whatever, with their thing of Miss Venezuela practically, and made up and so on, and this girl, her daughter, her friends, her cousins, they, you see how they make up and use like these chores or whatever in a way, in a sexualized way, and the girl is trying to keep in the back, keeping she's trying to not to play this role until it comes a point in which, well, she basically makes up and goes. This make it this and this actually happened like that. It was like from one, in a question of 6 months, I found another girl that was more willing to play the role of being the girly, trying to chase a guy to rescue her, more or less, to get together with her, that she could live with, and have kids, and and forget about studying, or so this is her main story. And yeah, unfortunately nowadays she's already fully on that situation. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Annabelle, with us. We're near the end of the time here that we have. I guess I touched upon this a, a little bit earlier, but obviously, different people with different political beliefs are going to be watching this documentary. It might be polarizing, it might be divisive, but as a thesis, as a artist statement, what is the takeaway that you hope people walk away with after watching it, regardless of political affiliation that pushes these individuals into polarities? Like, what is the message that you hope that they walk away with by watching the documentary?
Well, first of all, um, I want to bring the attention on the Venezuelan refugees. Um, all over the world. As I said, the diaspora itself is 5 million at this point, out of which 3 million are in refugee, ask for asylum, yeah, and are into this situation, and the asylum seekers are in this gray area in which they don't come from a war, or not from a natural collapse, so then it's actually even difficult for them to get the papers. And on the other hand, there is in many environments there is a xenophobia, yeah. So
Yeah,
then,
xenophobia.
so then the film, we are our intention is to use it for bringing up attention into that theme and to accompany the discussions, and possibly to make people sensitive about it. And from a more philosophical point of view, I tell you something that I've learned is that nowadays the humanity is very common to see that in the humanity people are after an utopia, yeah. And in Venezuela we did have this utopia in the hands, we did have it, and it is nowadays in the worst nightmare, the worst dystopic situation that you can imagine. And it's difficult to put the finger on why, but something that right now, after 20 years of living in Venezuela, having made this film and discuss about it, I see that to fall into radicalization, um, to 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 play that role and to get as well radicalized is equivalent to get blind, just to see through an ideology. And this really can affect so much the social networking, that you become, as a society, you become vulnerable. And really, like, there is where the populism comes into the propaganda, the hateful speech, the all these things, yeah? And I think that as a citizen, one has to be really aware of this, of not breaking the bridges between people in your families, not breaking these bridges, because when this happens, democracy is fragile and can be lost. In Venezuela, it was lost, and to recover, I'm going to spend my whole life trying to work into that and to try to change that for my kids, for instance. So I would say to the people that watch out with with getting polarized, with breaking bridges between you, and it comes from the family, from that level up. So yeah.
We just had a comment just come in, so I'll throw it on screen, from Paul Art. Very interesting documentary. Paul, thank you so much for watching. Anabel, any last closing statement or comment that you'd like to make before we sign off here?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me here, and we are very honored to be in the San Diego Latino Film Festival. Lots of luck, and I hope at some point to show other movies there and to meet you in person. But right now, that Once Upon a Time in Venezuela is there with you. I hope that you enjoy, that it is food for thought for you. And I am there, open to respond to questions anytime.
Thank you so much, Anabel. And thank you for all those who watched and listened and submitted some comments. Anabel, it was a pleasure talking to you. It's an honor to have Once Upon a Time in Venezuela at our festival. And now you can go back to sleep. Hopefully. Hopefully.
Oh, yes, I will do.
Thank you, Anabel. Talk to you soon.
Thanks very
Bye-bye.
much. Bye.
Bye.